Hey everybody here in this lovely little Zoom space that we're in, and everybody watching out in the interwebs. We're going to talk about social justice in the arts, and we're going to try to make it, interesting because we talk about this a lot. So we really wanted this conversation to be as interesting for us as hopefully it will be for you. But first, wanted to do some ground setting and some space setting before we jump into it. And so just to say, like, this can be as casual as it needs to be. So if you need to go grab some water, some coffee, if you're eating your salad, whatever you want, feel free to do your thing. Chesray?
I would say I want to set up the space a little. I want us to imagine that we're like at my apartment in Harlem. We're chilling. Okay, we're having possibly wine, maybe margaritas. I don't know. We're eating really good food. We're in my living room. We're just chopping it up, just kicking it. Talking about the
Yes.
ways in which truth is in our bodies. So that's kind of the set up, the vibe. If y'all are with me, that I want to kind of set up. So it's a safe container for us just to be in dialogue, chop it up, kick it, and just talk about all the things that ring true for us. So that's the vibes. If y'all with me.
Yes.
Awesome.
That's the vibes. And also just to say, to Chesray's point, feel free to jump in whenever, right? Like we'll throw some questions out there, but also like if you have a question for someone that's coming up, feel free to jump in and ask. Really want this to feel as conversational as we desire it to.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we start, and maybe we'll do this again, let's take a communal breath together just to get grounded. Is that okay with y'all? Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So, right where you are, just if you can sit up straight and making sure that the spine is really supported, right? Bring the shoulders down. Drop the hands if that feels good. Take a big inhale with me. Hold and exhale. I want you to unmute your mic so we can hear everyone's breath, collective breath together, just so we can create some
Okay,
groundedness.
good
All right,
idea.
y'all. So we're gonna take an inhale, and this exhale I call the pandemic exhale, the panini exhale. So we're just gonna exhale all of that panini, Panasonic energy right out of our bodies, if that's okay with you. All right, y'all. So take a big inhale with me.
Yeah.
Inhale. Woo, let's do that again. Inhale and exhale.
Ah.
All right, y'all. Let's get a popping over here.
Okay.
Cool. So we'll start by introducing ourselves, and then I would love to then popcorn it around the room so we know who's all here. And so I guess for a prompt, let's say we do name, pronouns, what organization you're representing, and then how you're showing up today in mind, body, and spirit or spirit. I'm Jaylen Levingston. I am the Director of Industry Initiatives at the Broadway Advocacy Coalition. I use he, him pronouns. I'm so happy to be here with everyone today. I am feeling, I'm feeling pretty unfiltered because I feel like I have been in a very like structured work environment up until this point today. And so I feel very like, let me just talk because I just don't have the capacity to be anything but myself right now. So that's how I feel. And I will pass it to Chesray.
Thank you, Jaylen. So I'm Chesray Dolpha. Pronouns is her, she. I am a native of South Africa, born and raised. I am the artistic director of BAC, Broadway Advocacy Coalition. I'm a storyteller. I love a juicy story. I will hear you any day, anytime. So I'm also a keeper of stories. So any stories you want me to keep, I'm happy to hold that space for you too. Yeah, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm feeling very close to what Jaylen said, like unfolded, like we just chopping it up, we're just about to kick it. So I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I'm just gonna say let's lean into the spice, let's lean into the flavor, the sauce, and however that might come together in this beautiful space. All right, y'all. I'm gonna hand it over to Noah.
Hi, y'all. My name is Noah. I use they, them pronouns. I am on the executive board at Broadway for Racial Justice, and I'm coming into the space today having run a lot of errands this morning. I was kind of all around town. And so this is my moment of just sitting down and breathing for a minute. And so I'm loving this energy of Chesray. I love the word spicy. I'm just going to lean into that. And yeah, as Jaylen said, we have a lot of these conversations. And so it's going to be nice to just kind of feel like we're just at the table having a dinner conversation about these things we talk about a lot. And I will pass it on to Christine.
Hi, thank you. I'm Christine Toy Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I am here as a founding member of the Asian American Performers Action Coalition, APAC, and also as the newly elected treasurer of the Dramas Guild. And I just want to add that I'm very proud that I'm the first Asian American officer of the Guild. So thank you so much for inviting me. I come here exhausted, but energized by being here in community with all of you. So I thank you. And I'm going to pass it to my dear friend, Angel.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, exhausted, but yes, my name is Angel. Oh, yeah, good. Zooming in from Lenape, unceded Lenape lands. My name is Angel. My pronouns are she, hers. And I also am feeling kind of exhausted. Also because I was a little sick last week, and that's a whole other thing. But anyway, I'm feeling exhausted, but I love the vibe of this Zoom room right here. And I'm also just warning you, I'm feeling a little emotional, so might be a little weepy, but that ain't no thing. We keep going and talking through it. So yeah. Oh, and let me pass it to Luis, is it?
Yes, thank you. Hola, 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 hola. My name is Luis Salgado, he, him, his. I am also in the Lenape space, but I want to honor where I come from Puerto Rico, which is the Taino lands. And today I am feeling it's a big mix because we're heading into this conversation, and a friend of mine came over to my home after seeing trials that are going on, and I had to sort of balance the act of emotions in the space because we were going into some work. So I am aware of the depth of the things that are going in the world. At the same time, I'm not ignoring all of that, especially not the next hour and a half, but I'm also joyful that in the other issue, which is the pandemic, I feel like there's a little bit more hope towards coming back to the thing we love. And so I show myself and present myself here with all of you wonderful humans with a 50-50 café con leche kind of emotional state of being aware, and there's so much heaviness for us to address, but also being hopeful that soon we will be having these conversations back in person. And I will pass it on to Brandon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Michael Nace. I'm the Executive Director of Broadway for Racial Justice. I take he, him pronouns. I'm zooming in from so-called Brooklyn, traditional lands of the Lenape and the Canarsie people. And I'm very much with Angel in that, even Luis, when you said watching trials, I started to tear up. It was like an immediate reaction. Me
too.
It is a day. Yesterday I felt a lot of rage, a lot of anger and rage. And this morning I woke up and just let it out and cried. And I've just been in that space all day. But very thankful to be in the company of you all.
Luis, you just reminded me, I forgot to say, sorry, Zhailon, I forgot, representing APAC as well. Chris and I are both founding members of the Asian American Performers Action Coalition. And Luis, you just said...
Thank you. Yeah, I am representing Revolución Latina, Art that Evolución, a revolution of evolution through the arts. I also want to make us all aware that in my home right now, there's two wonderful human beings that fight the battle of justice in the arts for so long with me now, together for 10, 14 years, each apart, Valeria Coso and Heather Hogan. I just want us to be aware that if you see me like, yeah, that's right, like I'm there.
And
like
I want everyone to
congratulating.
know that no one is here. And if you see me doing that, just don't mention it. Just let it
Okay.
happen. Chesray, I feel like it feels right to just lead us into maybe one more intentional breath before we jump in.
Absolutely. Let's stretch a little bit because I mean we all are exhausted. This pandemic has been edges torn apart. Okay. So right where we are, again, spine straight, shoulders down. Take a big grounding inhale, feeling the earth coming through your feet all the way into your heart space, into your head space, right? Take a big inhale and exhale. I want you to stretch the hands up like you're taking a big fake yawn and just stretch the back out, right? Go to the left side, creating space and ease in the body. Inhale, exhale. Go to the other side. Beautiful. Inhale and exhale. Drop the hands behind the back. Lock it in. Pop up the chest. Look up to the sky. Inhale some light. All the love that you need. Inhale and exhale. Let's give our hands a little bit of a rub. We are shooting a color from our heart into our hands. Imagine what your color is today, right? Feel that color. See that color going from the heart into the hands. Inhale, exhale, and just tap the collarbone. You are embedding the color into your body today. Ashe, ashe. Inhale and exhale. All right, y'all. Give me a little wiggle just to get all the energy out. All right, Jaylen, auntie.
There should be like an hour in the week where every organizer just comes on a Zoom and does that, and then they get out of there.
Absolutely.
Will
Will you lead that? Will you please lead that? I'll be there.
Listen here, y'all. Let's real talk. Okay, this is a first action item. Let's create some space for ease and breath. All right, y'all?
Yes, that's right.
I guess I'll kick us off. And like I said, these are just prompts and the conversation can go wherever they want to go. I'll start by saying that I've had a hard time historically calling myself an activist and even an organizer. I think that so many of those values are embedded in what I think an artist should be in the world. And it's so much easier for me to just call myself an artist. But I will say recently I have found the self-worth to be able to be like, no, you're an organizer. No, you're an activist. And you also are an artist. And in hindsight, when I think about my 12-year-old self, I'm interested in what parts of my life now would be surprising to him versus what parts of the way my artistry is intersecting with my civic life actually made sense, actually is a part of a long continuum maybe. And so I wanted to throw that out into the room. I'm just curious about people's relationship to where you always saw your artistry going and where it is now at this intersection of arts and activism and racial justice. And does it feel like it is truly a part of one long story? Or can you pinpoint a moment where things went and you were like, oh, now I'm actually doing this? So just wanted to throw that out there, and anyone can answer or riff off of that. If you want to.
I just wanted to add a quick note to that, Jaylen. If y'all agree with anything, feel free to drop a heart, a celebrate emoji, just a way to affirm what's being said in the community. I just wanted to activate that space for us in this way. Thank you, Jaylen.
Thank you. Is it okay if I just get started? And this is probably just more human, personal. I don't know. Search, internally searching for I don't know, my truth as you ask this question, or activate my thinking around it. I run this nonprofit organization for 14 years. We are Broadway Cares Equity Fight States is our parent or umbrella organization, and I've always been so in admiration of the way they work and what they do for us as a theater community. But 14 years into the work, I am, as I joined the word of the day, exhausted of the work that we do and we have to do. And it's an interesting thing because yes, all I want is to be an artist. All I want is to do art. And yesterday I was looking at my past. I was looking at history. I had some of my students come over and we were doing some work, some research work here, and I had to pop out photo albums. And they were asking me, where you come from? Well, I come from Puerto Rico, and I started in a public school, and my green jeans were getting muddy because we were practicing doing the split. And there's a joy, and there's a simplicity, and there's a sense of adventure in that quest of learning something and becoming free through that thing, versus a lot of what you just said, the activism, the responsibility, the leadership, the role of organizing. And so how did I come to be an organizer? I was a kid who wasn't as respectful as I could when I was 15 because I was playing around and I was tag, you're it, and I was just doing the games and the theater and the thing that I love. And all of a sudden I had to be in charge of a room. And when I had to be in charge of the room, no one respected me. And I was 15 years old. And I am extremely grateful that that moment in my life happened. Because if I wanted my peers to really follow the leadership that I have for them, whether that was a choreography that what I was doing or a jazz warm-up or whatever, I needed to lead by example. I couldn't just try to lead. I couldn't just think about it as power. I couldn't do anything else that was like, okay, this is not about me leading this room today. This is about how I'm behaving in every rehearsal. And that immediately changed the way that I thought about the role of leader. So anyway, I say tire with Revolución Latina because from that experience, you keep learning. And the idea of a nonprofit, in my mind, really is the idea that I should no longer exist if I do my work well. That ideally, I'm covering the basis of what I am there to serve in a way that ideally I should not exist next year. And unfortunately, next year you learn, well, there's still something I need to take care of. And then let me take care of that. And hopefully next year I don't have to exist. And so it is frustrating that after 14 years of this work that looks for social justice and activism and awareness and representation, now more than ever, it looks like those gaps are voided. Those gaps are needing us to do the majority of the work. Like as if we had been wasting our time. And of course, I'm being dramatic. I know we haven't wasted the time. I know we touch a lot of lives, but it also feels like we're going around in circles that make bigger holes, and that is frustrating. So I don't know if that gets anything into the topic, but as you brought that in, that's the first thing that I get in my heart.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
That's
I wanted to say that I started being a part of the elected leadership of Actors Equity in 1992. I just left last year. That's 28 years for those doing the math. And 22 of those years, I was the chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Committee. And I recently found a letter that I had written to the New York Times about a representation of Asian Americans in the theater. I wrote it in 1991, and I could tell you, I could show it to you and say, I just wrote this. And you would say, yeah, you just wrote that like yesterday. And so that it does, I follow you, Luis, in that feeling of, have I wasted 30 years banging my head against the wall over this? I hope to think not. I like to think that those of us that have the capacity to do this work as an extension of our artistry do. And it's a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity because we have those skills and the passion to do it.
And the self-awareness, and the self-awareness, Christine, of have I done enough? Right, because we think we've been doing and so actively trying to carry whatever torch it is that we are, each and every one of our own roles. But at times, to quote Hamilton, I'm not sure if I am Hamilton or Burr. Right, like, am I actually being super proactive and taking action and like, no matter what, I'm going to do this and you're going to listen, or am I waiting for it at times? And it's an interesting debate.
I love what you said about those who have the capacity to do? I'm interested in staying there for a second and just wondering if other people want to jam on that point.
Are
Yeah.
you? Oh, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I can kind of riff off of that. This journey is, I'm very new to this work. I'm 25 years old. I graduated from school college about 2 or 3 years ago from a musical theater program in New York City. And for me, the shift and for me, it was really a calling. It was a spiritual experience for me. Like, this is what I'm being called to do on top of the calling I have as an artist and performer. And I think for me, I was fortunate of having moved from a very small town in Pennsylvania to New York City and become privy to a lot of the social issues through my friends and through just being in New York City and seeing such diversity compared to the smaller white town I was from. So I think for me, yeah, it felt, I meditate a lot and I do yoga, and it kept coming up in my meditation that I needed to take that next step of saying something and not feeling like I didn't have the knowledge or experience or anything to say something. And I think that to me was such an important part of the process, was getting past the imposter syndrome step, the I'm not smart enough or old enough. That's, I think, still a thing for me. Being 25 years old, it's like, am I even old enough to be speaking about these things? And when it really is this calling, and you see that there's things in your life that have led to this kind of work, I think that's really how it lined up for me.
I have a question that's kind of connected to this. So I just want to preface the question first, right? So most often we show up as adults, but we have like an inner child that is sometimes present in the space and that sometimes show up. And sometimes that inner child, could be bruised, could have been harmed in the communities where we come from, right? So there's always this duality of when that inner child shows up. So has there been moments for you in this organizing work where you felt that the younger you showed up in a space, and what did that look or feel like for you?
That's really interesting. I'm really thinking about whether that applies or not, because I'm trying to think of like what my inner child was in relation to this. It feels related to, who was it that said something about, or was it Jaylen? Was it you who said if your 12-year-old self could see
Yeah, yeah.
now? Chesray, is that sort of what you're thinking about? Is like the child then and
Yeah, exactly. Because, and let me just give some context. Often, let me talk from my personal experience. I grew up in South Africa in a, black colored community. We told to not speak up. We told that a child has a place. And so there's a cultural like silencing of our voice, right? So sometimes when I come into
right.
spaces, that child shows up because she wants to be heard. And so there's this relationship between the ways in which we were raised and that cultural context that affects our organizing work sometimes, not always. And so that's kind of the relationship.
Thank you. That's clarifying, and that's yeah, it's fascinating. And now I'm thinking, okay, yeah, because definitely in our house, my parents are both immigrants from two different countries in Asia, and it was like you don't speak up, you don't talk back, you're obedient and you follow the rules and you do your best, and all of that, first generation child of immigrants thing.
Yeah.
And uh, and so that was my inner child at the time. But it's funny you're saying inner child, because I think my outer child was like, okay, it's bad for me to speak up and talk back and all of that stuff, fight.
Mm.
But my inner child was like, God fucking damn it, like, this is pissing me off, you know what I mean? So I think, so now I'm like really thinking about your question and going, I don't know, but I wonder if, I think it's fascinating, is I wonder if there's a part of the inner self that was like, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Connecting back to your question, Jaylen, about if there was a turning point, I'm realizing I think there was for me, because I didn't think about activism, and like Luis and Chris were saying, it's like we exist so that we don't have to exist. Like,
Yeah.
we came together so that we could do this work and hopefully get back to what we really just want to focus on, which is just being artists. And I think I got to the point, like a lot of us, that at that year that APAC formed, where we were all just more angry than we were scared of speaking up.
Yes.
And I think, and I think so maybe that was, I'm still wrestling with your question there about the inner child, but I think my inner child was just like having a tantrum a little bit, or having a temper, and just being like, this is bullshit. We got to do something. So.
Yep. Thank you so much. Brandon, I would love to hear from you. I just want to give you some intentional space.
No, I mean, I wrote that I am so much right now trying to do like a lot of like, look at myself in the mirror. What do I need to look at? What do I need to examine that comes up? And when you said inner child, I was like, oh my, because I just was like, I don't feel like I really had a childhood per se for me personally, in that the life that I, came into was just like, I remember from a very young age, my grandparents that didn't live in the same town, as I got older, as I was in high school, they finally were like, every time we would come and visit, we would say, Brandon is the adult in that house, from when I was like in elementary school. And so, and when I think about the word activism and I think about like the word activate, it's like, well, I've been activated in that kind of hyper aware way from a very young age, because I didn't have any choice. It was like, this is what you have to do. And so then I think about like activism as a whole, and like activating for those around you or for your community. And for me, it was like, well, I had a little sister, and so there was a constant fear and worry about her and her survival in the space that we were in. And then it was just that way for the rest of my life, in college, like being in student government and all of the, like, it was very much a part of me. But I think inner child, I wrote that down because I was like, oh, you may need to like examine like the lack thereof of the childhood and how that has played into things, like just examine that.
Yeah, definitely. Does anybody want to add to that?
I do. I have this I have this question of all of you, because when I was growing up, I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, going to see Broadway shows. All I ever wanted to do was be in a Broadway show. And even though I wasn't seeing a whole lot of role models on stage or in film and television, I somehow didn't really factor that into whether I was going to do this or not. And and it was a rude awakening, and I became a professional very, very early. I joined Equity this summer I graduated from high school, but it was a very rude awakening to find out what the real story was. So I'm just wondering from all of you, if as we're looking at the question of an inner child, if you had that experience or a similar kind of experience when you were growing up and having these dreams of being an artist and etc.
Thank you, Christine. Anyone want to jump in and answer that?
The problem with me is you're gonna have to tell me don't jump in, okay? So
I got you.
but there's so much brewing in my mind and in my memories right now. I took a couple of notes. The first one is that I just love humans. Like the idea that we're all here and sort of not even starting a conversation, but tapping into this inner child question, or the realities we all face, and not talking about something external, but coming first to like, wait, what is my experience again? Wait, I love this. Thank you so much. And the thing that we have in common, at least for where my experience in life has been, is I come from Puerto Rico, right? And I didn't experience necessarily that much racism or division in growing up, because we were all Puerto Rican. Whether you were white, brown, black, you were Puerto Rican. It wasn't a thing. And when I talk with my friends in the AAPI community, I feel like when they came in versus when they were growing in the States, the experience is the same, right? Like we were a Nation community or Filipino community, Chinese, whatever. And so we have been talking a lot about this the last 2 weeks, that we have that thing in common, that it's not until we step in the States, the land of the free, that all of a sudden we are different. All of a sudden, talking about the last 4 years, we have to build walls to segregate the Latinos who are dangerous and scary from coming into the United States of America. And, talking theater, it reminds me of those moments in Ragtime, right? When the Jewish community is coming in and Tata's trying to bring her daughter but isn't that how this country was made? Isn't that the thing that makes this so special? And so I feel like my inner child is a very different experience because I didn't have the division. Now, in that inner child, what did I have? Adventure, innocence, right? The desire to dream, to accomplish those dreams. And when I first stepped into the Broadway field, that was my inner child. It was the same. My innocence, my ignorance of the business was the thing that kept me driving. That was the thing that all I wanted to do was learn from all these people that were around me. I didn't see any divisions. I didn't care for it. Like, I was just like, just get me to the stage. But when time passes, when you get more experience, when you sacrifice that innocence, all of a sudden you see something else. Now, wait, we're talking about walls. Wait, someone wrote one day that show is full of Latinos that will never make it to Broadway. And they were right? All of these things happen. So then the next thing is my justice, my theater social justice has been to have a show like In the Heights make it and be a part of it. To have a show like On Your Feet make it and be a part of it. And so my inner child rejoicing in the same kind of, I'm back with my green pants in the school doing the thing I love, but now on this field, versus having to fight a battle. So the social justice thing, the compartment where we go into segregation and division and the political different views make these divisions in who we are, how we exist, how we behave, how we should behave, that's when the problem begins. So going back to similarities, what we have in common is that as children, and my question maybe to all of you, how many divisions did we really see? And of course, it would be very different if you were growing up in the States, right? And those divisions were really around you than if you're in another environment like Puerto Rico, for example. That's my contribution right now.
Well, it's so interesting. And to kind of connect that to Christine's, I grew up in the South and divisions were clear. Where there were divisions, it was clear. So that theater, and specifically Broadway, like specifically looking out from Louisiana to this far off like Emerald City, became a place in my imagination wherein there were no divisions and everything was possible. And so I really relate and resonate with this feeling of like, despite the fact that I grew up and didn't see a bunch of me's, just seeing one was enough. Just to know that one was there, I knew I could be there. And it's so interesting because now being in it and also being a part of the work of making sure it truly is an equitable space, I think for me personally, part of what keeps my engine going is the hope and the belief, and maybe even the secret belief, that it still is maybe the last or only institution wherein my full humanity can show up without inherent oppression. Now, the oppression is there, but there is still something in me, some 12-year-old, that understands and knows that the magic of everyone circling up and saying, all right, here we go, let's do this, doesn't exist anywhere else. And so in some ways it makes the fight worth having because I've seen enough hope there. Like, I don't know if I would be able to be an organizer and activist working in a different field because there's just not enough hope that I see in other places. And I think that hope of a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, 13-year-old has sustained me. And why we want to start this conversation circling around youth is we know that like a large swath of the BroadwayCon audience are young folks coming up. And just to kind of transition into talking about them even more pointedly, going from the inside to the out, you know, just curious around what kind of inspiration as an organizer have you gleaned from the generations below you or the generations coming up now? Particularly Gen Z, have you seen things that you're like, we got to use that? We have to use this. And this is why, you know, it's important to listen to these folks. I'm just curious.
Well, that's a great that segues great into what I wanted to just acknowledge Noah from earlier. Noah, when you were speaking about being so young and wondering like sometimes maybe what am I doing here? But I love it personally. I think most of us just love that you identified early on that you wanted to, you know, fight, that you wanted to do this, get in there, mix it up, you know. That is really inspiring. I was not nearly so civic minded when I was 25. I was a mess and I was selfish and just, you know, still figuring out who I was. And you know, the permission to do that, of course, is always there, but that's part of what's so, you know, to your point, Zhailon, about the younger folk. It's what's inspiring is this, I feel like there's this collective awareness that even our generation did not have, just political, socio-political awareness, it, just a more ready acknowledgement of different ethnicities, cultures, gender expressions, just everything. Like, I just feel like there's so much more awareness. And I think you're also right that the theater, artistic, acting community is still that place where that really is, we really can find bonds with each other over it. And if we feel like we've got to fight something, we will find our best allies with each other there. So that I just feel like as a group, they're inspiring, and you know, their grasp of technology also I find inspiring.
I would say that actually, this is a blanket statement, and I don't like to make blanket statements, but that is so much of where my hope actually lies. In a space of young people who have just come into this business and who can immediately recognize, no, this is whack. And can say like, and I don't have to do it. That don't have so much invested in the ideation of Broadway, that they're like, I'll go do something else. Like, it's not like the end all be all for me to have 15 Broadway credits and 5 Tonys. Like I'm really good. That, and you know, at BFRJ we have an ambassador team, and like that is the space that the majority of those people exist in. And for me to be able to like cultivate relationships with them, and you know, when crazy stuff happens and when crazy articles come out about crazy people, and I look around, and those are the people, those kids are unashamedly like, this is wrong, I'm not standing for it, I won't work for this person ever. And I'm like, that actually, it's like, that's the future. And then the kids that haven't even come into the industry, I'm like so passionate about education and about making sure that we are addressing the problems in theater education, because that is also where our change comes from, to be able to get these younger people to say like, no, stand in your power. You don't have to be what this industry has told you that you have to be. You don't have to be this type. You don't have to look this way. You don't have to sing that. Like, be who you are and demand that people see you as who you are. So that, like, that's my hope, is in these like fearless young people.
Would love to know your perspective, Noah. But just to say, just to like take it there, because let's face it, you know, the lack of sharing of the Scott Rudin article throughout our major Broadway institutions is so embarrassing that I can barely articulate it. And I can recall when the Harvey Weinstein story broke, each one of those institutions, media outlets had something to say, had something to share. We're tracking it. And, it's so frustrating to feel as if this industry that's much smaller than Hollywood, has such a hard time just saying the thing. And what I notice in younger generations is that they will just say the thing, and then we have to deal with it. So yeah, I just wanted to just say the thing that I felt underneath what you were saying, Brandon, but also I wanted to make space for Noah as well.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Angel, for that acknowledgement earlier. It's very interesting because I actually lie directly right on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z.
Right.
And so getting to kind of see both sides from that perspective, and being of that age group, like Gen Z, to me, a lot of it, TikTok, I don't know what the fuck TikTok is. Like a lot of it,
Thank you, Noah.
I'm like, and
yes, thank you so much.
And I get some flack from some other people because they're like, what are you doing? Why aren't you on TikTok? And I'm just like, I got enough social media accounts. But that's all to say, I think so I feel fortunate to be in the space that I'm in to, be involved in these conversations and be in these rooms. And I think looking forward and seeing the younger generation, the biggest thing that's being called for, especially after the pandemic, is support for these people to be making these statements and say these things. A lot of them are non-union. A lot of them don't have representation yet. And that on top of, so coming out and making a bold statement about something can immediately blacklist someone before they're even in the door. And so I think, especially with things starting to come back, that is a fear of mine of, we already had a group of people who weren't getting in the door because of the systemic issues that we've all been able to address and realize. And, now we're post-pandemic where everyone's been struggling, and how can we, listen to that audience and support them so that not only are we taking, inspiration and knowledge from them, but then also giving them the platforms to be able to take over for when, this group of people has to move on. I think that to me is so important. And that involves like mutual aid, emergency financial assistance to me is so important. And so these are kind of the things I think in coming back that will help amplify the message of the young people and give them the support to continue speaking out against these things, so that we don't then jump right back into the system of everyone, as Jaylen said, like it's radio silence. And it's like, why are we not, this is just right back to the cycle that we're all trying to disrupt. And we've spent a year talking about now. And to see a year go to waste would be, really upsetting.
And can I just say that is like the radio silence is what is continuing the cycle. It's like these younger kids want to be like, yeah, I'll stand in my truth and say like this is wrong. And I would expect that they're probably hoping for somebody that is like of a higher stature than them, that has been in this business longer, has a bigger platform, that would say, yes, exactly what they said. I'm standing with them. So know that you mega titans of this industry, when you come for these young kids and you say you're not going to get in the union, you say you're not going to book these Broadway jobs, then you can count me out. I'm not going to be working for you to make your money either, because I'm standing with them.
And that's on everything, okay? I just want to quickly, go ahead, Louis, before
I apologize, and I hate that I'm going to bring this up, but I also get a little concerned because I think that the younger generation, everything yes to everything we have said. But unfortunately, and I'm not taking away from anyone, but there's another reality that the younger generation also has, which is that it leaves so much by the social media status. And so I am not at all taking away, again, the power in those who stand on truth. But I cannot, and I've never supported, not before, not now, not in the future, the idea of fame. Standing on a social media platform just because I want my name out there. And I think that that's a scary thing, and it's a balanced act between us standing up and speaking our truth and fighting for justice versus people just going out there and bluntly saying whatever comes to their mind, whenever it comes to their mind, without having done the homework, without having done the proper research on the issues and the steps. And I'm always very hesitant, and I go back to my Hamilton versus Verb sort of complex, right? That before I go out there and I start fighting, I must do the homework and know exactly what has been done and how has it been done, so that I am not burning all the bridges of evolution and growth. I just wanted to put that out
Well,
there.
and this is why coalition building is so important, right? And I've been very, very, very blessed to be a young director who's directed a lot of people who are much older than me. And I know the gifts of having multiple generations in a room. And I think that, you know, to Brandon's point of being like, I stand with them, I think there's another responsibility, which is like when we see that happening, being like, baby, come in. Let me give you this resource. Let me take you out to dinner. Let me take you out to coffee. Let me hear what your story is. Let me show you that we actually aren't that different. And I think that's its own reckoning as well. I think part of the gifts of this moment has been being in conversations where multiple generations can get together and see that the story is very similar, though the tools may be different, though the histories may be different, though the perspectives may come from different places, that there is a responsibility, so that from that point, that young person has the choice to say, do I want to listen? Or do I want to do it on my own, which is a different conversation, right? But I think that there is this crucial juncture that we see in all of our movements, right? Where you have an older generation and a younger generation coming together to get resources from each other. I think about the Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin video that, has gone viral over a couple of years, where you have Baldwin representing an older guard and Nikki Giovanni representing a newer guard, and them understanding the value of them sitting down, talking to each other, and really listening. So yes, to that point, and also, how can we then be creating a whole different space wherein calling each other in is an act of grace and love and coalition building.
I just wanted to add to this notion of social media and if it's helpful or not. And I just want to add this into the space. So for me, it's like, as a Black woman, what I have enjoyed for the first time on Instagram, I'm seeing different kinds of bodies being celebrated. I'm seeing Lizzo, like, in her two-piece swimming suit at her pool, loving her best life, being in her body. And like, so there's also like this reimagining of what does it mean to be in body and to be in your body, that's showing up in social media, that I'm really enjoying. I mean, YouTube is a trove of resource for Black women in hair. Y'all know YouTube's hair advisement is like a thing, right? And not just Black women, people all over the world like come to this as a resource, right? So now we have people talking about 4B, 4B type hair and 3A and 3C. And so all of these things that really now feels like, oh damn, like there's people now having dialogue around how to treat our hair, how to treat our bodies. So there is a downside to it, but I'm really enjoying the ways in which I'm getting affirmed in my Blackness, in my queerness, in my curliness, in my curves. That feels to me like social media is supporting my humanity and not taking away from it.
Yeah, I just agree with everyone and say that there is this shiny aspect to activism on social media, that it looks really fancy and it looks good. And I think, we've forgotten that not all of your activism has to exist on social media. I think we've forgotten that we also have control over how we utilize our social media. I don't go on my Instagram every day anymore. I go on it when I need to share something, or if I need to check in, like I use it as that tool, because it's not actually not healthy for me to attempt to try to put everything out through there. So I think it's both things of being like, we have to listen to the younger audience, but the younger audience also has to say, if I'm choosing to put this on my platform, if I'm choosing to have this voice, I have to be listening to this podcast and watching these documentaries and reading these books. I hear so many people say, like, I learn a lot from TikTok, and it's like, that's great. Now, take one of those 1-minute videos and find a book that you can read so that you get the actual full scope of everyone's laughing. I'm honestly not kidding, but
We know you're not kidding. That's why we're laughing.
I know.
And because that is how you get the depth, and because these are not topics that you can just flippantly throw out and talk about. And with, as Chesray said, there are YouTube, like there's so many different channels now that we can, and conduits of information that we can get things from, that are on our phones, on the things that we use all the time. So, oh, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Well, Noah, you said you're 25, but I think that you're like 25 going on 52. You're like, I feel like you've got this older soul going on there, because like,
Yeah.
just hearing all this stuff, I'm like, yeah, I think like that.
I get that quite often.
Yeah.
Talking about like what's it, the ways in which social media is kind of influencing political discourse. So a quick pivot, y'all. So I'm reading a lot on social media, in the newspaper, in the books that I'm reading around abolitionist theory and this upcoming new exciting way of looking at the carceral system and looking at how we can really emancipate and liberate ourselves, right? So my question is the current abolitionist movement a realistic idea for Broadway on how to support people's liberation within this community?
Wish you could ask a harder question than that, Chesray.
I was gonna say,
Softballs
can you explain a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, I can, but does any of the other panelists want to jump in and talk around how they understand abolitionist theory that's coming up?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the same boat, wanting to learn more the way you mean it. For me, Darwin is the thing in my mind that comes, I'm not too familiar with this.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? So this upcoming like discourses around this idea, like abolitionist theory means that we have to do completely away with the systems that we have. Reform is not possible. So we go, the carceral system, meaning prisons, like has to go. The way that people get police has to go. Like, because currently the political discourse is saying that we need reform. So it's reform based. Abolitionist theory says, nah, y'all, this system is broken all the way. We have to like scrap all of that and start from the beginning. So my question is that a realistic idea for us to think around liberation in the Broadway community, or is it like unrealistic? Brandon, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think that I'm always a both and. I'm very rarely either or. Because I'm like, there are infrastructures that for me, I'm like, I want to take that infrastructure and gut it, but still have the infrastructure. It's like, I would rather buy a brownstone and renovate it, than like go into one of these shiny new high rises. Now I love a shiny new high rise. Like they have some like legit shower heads.
What a shower head reference.
But also I'm like, I could also take that shower head and put it in this brownstone that I would like actually kind of prefer. But I think in the way that I think, when I say that it needs to be gutted, I'm like, yeah. So whenever, also we said we're just going to be real, so I'm just going to be real. Whenever Charlotte St. Clair says we can't open at full capacity, or we can't open unless it's at full capacity because of the business model, I'm like, right, we need to change the business model. There's no question. We need to sit down, and producers, like, there needs to be a huge conversation, and it needs to be said, oh, we're actually going to bring people into these production teams to say, I was just having this conversation today. I said, you need somebody on your producing team who is going to say the things that I'm saying, who's going to say, where's this money going? Why is this money going here? Why isn't money being taken from here and putting it here? Oh, because people want to get rich. Right. We're not doing that anymore. That's done. We're not doing that anymore. And I think it's like, those are big steps. Those are big steps to say, like, we need to change the financial model, like, completely. That to me is like the gutting that needs to happen. Those are just.
Angel, I see your hand.
I'm with you, Brandon. I think there's and is good because, you know, there may be things that we can keep and things we can change. For me, I've been wondering, and I'm no expert, but I've been thinking that especially when it comes to Broadway, but New York theater in general, that the financial issues, that the idea of really gutting everything, especially the financial model, which is what it all ends up revolving around, is intimately tied to the real estate crisis in New York, because rent prices have astronomically shot up over the last few decades, right? And so the majority of budgets go to simply renting a space or owning a space. So starting with that, it's like, so I feel like it's rethinking any financial model, which I really think needs to happen. Because I mean this for Broadway, for off Broadway, especially nonprofit, all that bullshit needs to go.
I'm done. All that bullshit.
All that bullshit needs to go. When I found out that, you know, I've been telling people this. When I found out that Oscar Eustis makes $850,000 a year, I was like, yeah, exactly. That face right there. I was like, excuse me, excuse me.
All of our nonprofit staff are getting paid like nothing.
Like nothing? And he's talking about being communist and everything. I'm like, oh really? Oh really? Maybe, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's what it's like. That's the whole idea. And for even further, like, I also am like, the amount of transparency that needs to start happening is unreal, and people are terrified of it. And I'm like, no. The reason you're terrified of it is because you've been doing things that are wrong, and everybody will be able to see it. But I'm like, why are all of these people that are working to support in this hierarchical structure, all of these people down here making pennies, and this one person up here who is being supported by all of these people down here making all of this money? That doesn't make sense at all. That does not make sense.
And also, if you want to talk about the funding and who's getting funded, or the lion's share of the funding, that also speaks to this sort of lopsided pyramid. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's to get to your question, Chesray. I don't know if it's a realistic scenario for right now. I feel like there's been this chipping away of all the things we understand, and hopefully that will continue. But I don't know.
I tend to think of abolition as, and this is kind of like, I think, the Angela Davis model of thinking about abolition, as the radical reimagining of an institution to the point where it is unrecognizable to its current self.
Yeah.
And I think about the ways in which you all are talking about the economics of things, and like, I can see a world in which the way we produce theater, the way we support each other, makes us look back on this time like, what did we do? There was a time where people didn't wear seatbelts, you know? And I think that, like, thinking about it in that way helps it become a little more manageable of an idea for me. Like, I'm all about reform, that leads to us not being married to the current aesthetic, to the current level of comfort we have to, this current institution, right? And I think so often we think of abolition as just burn it down, right? But like we know as artists that like half of our job is deconstruction and the other half of our job is reconstruction. And so I often think of abolition as a question of reconstruction. And I think that, there is great potential, and maybe I'm speaking from a naive, younger point of view, but there is great potential for us in 10 years to look back on, what we call Broadway and see it as a radically different thing, even if that means where we swing our influence is just different. That Broadway is just a set of streets where cool things happen sometimes, no different than the cool shit that happens in Brooklyn, no different than the cool shit that is hopefully happening in Queens, that is hopefully happening all over the world, right? And so in some way that's a level of abolition to me. It's just like decentering the capitalistic kind of like draw of having one place where it all has to matter. And I think with this moment, kind of like organizing out of this moment, and I don't just mean of the last year, but I mean going back all the way to the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, and even going further back to like Occupy Wall Street, it is the decentering of the idol that feels like where we're all headed. It's not kosher anymore to say this movement was led by 5 people. It's not kosher anymore to say that we all have to be over on this side. It's about like, in what way can we all have collective liberation? And so I find hope in thinking about abolition, even though I may not see it, for a very long time.
Yeah. Brandon, I see you up.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say I also always want to be cognizant to say like that also the verbiage that we use is that white people want to twist it to mean something that it isn't. So the word abolition, and they will be quick to be like, oh, they want to burn it all down. And I'm like, how did they paint Fred Hampton out to be so that they could kill him when Fred Hampton was trying to provide medical service, free lunches, was trying to serve a marginalized community, was uniting intersectionally different people, different races, different ethnicities. Like, and so I'm like,
and was 21.
And was 21. And I'm like, so y'all can say like, oh, they want to burn it down, they want to da 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 da. And I'm like, but as these people in this space sit down and we're like, the way that this works is wrong and doesn't make sense. So to you, that is translated into a different way. And I'm sorry that it's that way for you, but that doesn't mean that that's the blanket of what it is, because it isn't.
So I have a quick sidebar question. How do we decenter white supremacy within the Broadway industry then?
Can I? There's a lot of things in my head. You're all like, I don't know now if I'm going to end up going to bed happy anymore. I'm back at being pissed. And so that's one thing. The second thing is, thanks for clarifying, can you say it for me, abolitionist? Because I agree that reform, it's maybe the word, right? Like we're revolution of evolution through the arts, right? That's sort of like the idea of Revolution Latina, making a revolution of evolving, of growing, of making change. And so when I'm hearing so many themes, one of them is Broadway, and decentralizing Broadway. So like, but Broadway is not the only thing. It's never been the only thing. So who is to blame there? Who's responsible for the perspective that is central, right? It's us loving it, or it's the people, like in my case, for Latina community, it's everyone I serve that looks upon Broadway as the main thing of art, but it's not. The Brooklyn movement of theater and arts is fantastic, and so is in the Bronx and in Harlem and in Puerto Rico and in Cuba, right? Like there's so many wonderful places for us to learn about art. So who is centralizing Broadway? That's the first thing I'm asking, because it's not.
Get into it. No, I'm saying get into it.
Yeah, we're also to blame a little bit, right? Like, and by we I mean all of us, because we're the one like, I need to be on Broadway. But no, like I get like how many scripts Salgado Productions gets weekly. And a lot of times I'm like, this should not be a Broadway show. Let's make this in Argentina. Let's make this in Colombia. Let's develop this in Santo Domingo, right? Like, we don't have to make it, oh yeah, the goal of this is to go to Broadway. That's in part our fault. And so when it comes to economics and rent, yeah, like Charlotte and the Broadway League and everybody that works in these incredible big houses, they do have a rent to pay, and that also is government based. Like, how is New York helping the arts not have to pay all those money so that the audience doesn't have to pay $500 in a ticket? Like, yes, we can put all the responsibility on the Broadway League and Charlotte and whoever you or we or whoever's pointing a finger wants to point a finger, but it's a collective thing. Everything we do in life is a collective thing. We don't eat by ourselves, right? There's people working on the tomatoes we're having in our fridge because we're no longer in the hunter sort of time period. So we need each other. We are interconnected. And I guess my point with that is that we are equally responsible as leaders and activists to decentralize it by doing theater outside of Broadway, or by developing and embracing the growth of our artists everywhere we can. Am I making any sense with this?
So
I
much
love what
sense.
you're saying.
It reminds me of one of my favorite Baldwin quotes, which is like, a majority does not speak to the amount of people. A majority speaks to where we throw our influence. Right. And so in that way, we can take on that responsibility of being like, it doesn't have to go anywhere. It doesn't have to change at all. But if it doesn't, where then will we swing our influence?
Same I feel, just to get it out of my chest with the Oscar example. Listen, I love the public theater. I've been inspired by the public theater for so long, and all I want is my Latinx community to be able to represent themselves or ourselves in our own theater at the park or down at the public theater or wherever, because one of the programs we run is a Shakespeare program, which always gets questioned, why are you doing Shakespeare and not Lope de Vega or Cervantes? And we can go into that different conversation. But in Revolución Latina, there's only 2 staff members who get paid. None of them are making not even $1,000, a week, not even. And they've been there for 14 years because we built the thing believing, back again in nonprofit organizations, that we're here to serve. And that if we can put 99.9 of the funds that we get into services and action, we're accomplishing our mission. And so that's the real question I'm then wanting to ask. Forget Oscar. If he builds his steps to be able to get to a place where they are paying him whatever fee, good for him, good for the institution. But where is the institution saying, wait, we're a nonprofit organization. We're here to serve people. And this what was the fee that we said that he's getting paid?
$850K.
8,000.
No, 850,000.
Oh my goodness.
You said 800? I thought you said 85,000.
You know how many people literally dying of hunger I get to serve for like a decade with 1 year of that salary? And that is the thing I want to then ask the public theater. Like, I'm not going to judge the individual. Yes, you're accepting it. You maybe work for it. Maybe you think you own it and deserve it. Fine, I'm not going to judge you. But the institution, you're a nonprofit organization. How are you allowing this to happen? And if we're going into Guatemala, like again, I'm going to go to my community. If we put that money in Guatemala and Mexico and Panama alone, thousands of people will be able to get on their feet, literally, from a food perspective, from a shelter and home perspective, from clothing perspective, and access to the arts and access to education. Revolución Latina, we built. Sorry, Angel. We were able to put $10,000 in India in developing what became a school and a community center, and the money that we thought was for one was able to do 2. We were able to physically structure and get started 2 spaces that work as school and community centers with $10,000. So when you just look at that equation, you go to the institution and you're like, how can you allow this? How many people can you be helping with one of those year's salaries? That's my question there.
It's a great question, and I have to push us towards the end of our time together, unfortunately.
No.
Yes, I know it's the worst. It
We have
really
like
is.
7 more minutes, I would say.
Yeah, we have like 7 more minutes. So what I wanted to do, and that's a great question to just like linger in space, Louise. So thank you for asking it. But I want to pivot us to hopefully a place that can end us in a less angry spot. But I'm interested in the ways in which either you or your organizations are finding pleasure and joy within the work. Pleasure and joy.
I'd like to just speak on behalf. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you?
No, I'm just laughing because Brandon's laughing because we're all just like,
What's a pleasure?
Hey,
Yeah, no, I hear you.
well, what is that?
So I just want, so I'm going to try to go towards the pleasure and joy and think about uplifting the communities that are not Broadway, that are around the country, that are doing our stories through our lenses. And this has been so mind-blowing to me, that the thought of not chasing after, that elusive, it's kind of like, I want to be your friend, but you don't want to be my friend, so I want to be your friend even more. And and maybe the thought of really, one of my favorite quotes is, "Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated," and keep finding those things. One thing I just wanted to put out there, part of the work that I'm doing with the Dramatists Guild, is we're about to unroll the first inclusion rider that I've seen. Yeah, so that writers can go to producers while they're negotiating their contracts and say, "This is where I stand, and this is what I really want to see from you. Will you meet me?" And so that it brings me joy to be able to work on these kinds of initiatives to hopefully inch us a little forward.
Yep. And I want to say this, Christine, to your point, and now I'm angry again. Okay, y'all know we're going back and forth, right? Because it's like, yes, we should decentralize Broadway and go make theater in Harlem, but then it's also like, why we gotta go to the park? Why we have to go to Harlem? What is wrong with making space for us in this community where we want to be?
Exactly.
And we are asking for space? Why do we have to be relegated to communities, that we come from in order to create theater that we love to see? So now I'm pissed at Broadway because we have to go over there to do the work we want to do when we are asking you explicitly to make space for us on Broadway, and y'all don't want to do it.
But also, I'm like, Escape to Margaritaville, I actually am kind of okay. I don't need to be like in the same space as them.
yeah.
The Margarita roll reference. Angel?
No, Chesray, I could spend, like you, I could spend a lot of time talking about that. I'm going to try to honor Zhailon's request, and I had to think about it for a second. This isn't the theater community, but it is acting, and it is Asian American related. I am so excited, and I'm probably going to get emotional. I'm so excited that Minari, the film that about Korean immigrants, is nominated for the first time, and that Stephen Yuen has an Oscar nomination. That little boy that I want to adopt and steal from his family, Alan Kim, that he's getting all this attention. It just makes me so... I'm just so moved. And the fact that we're in 2021 and we're talking about this and it's the first is, again, like you, Chesray, I'm like, a swing me to the rage, and I'm just like, why is this the first and the only? But it's happening, and I'm trying to be patient and breathe. So yes.
That's a word on today. Be patient and breathe. Okay, y'all write that in your journal, okay?
Yeah.
I would say that I think it's interesting also that it's when our communities are like being celebrated and thriving, and that's where the joy comes from, and that it's like, yeah, that's what we're fighting for. Like, we're here so that Minari can be celebrated, because it should. Like, are you kidding me? And that Stephen, who I'm like, how is this just now happening for him? I literally stopped watching The Walking Dead when he was done. I was like, I'm out.
Me too.
I was like, how dare you? I'm done with this. But like, for me, the joy is like getting, like, when we did Revival, our concert for Black History Month, and like sitting in a recording studio with like a full black band and like being in the room while Kayla Davion is like, I was just like, I don't get why we're having to fight so hard for this to be the norm. Like, I don't get it. When it's this incredible and we can watch so much mediocre stuff, like, how are we so the joy is coming in being able to be in these spaces and cry together and laugh together and cuss and scream together. Yeah.
I think the joy, oh, sorry, Chesray. The joy for me, especially over this last year, has been really getting in community with the gender non-conforming and trans BIPOC community, and feeling a sense of, you know, being seen, and in a world in which people like us have been erased for so long. I think that's also, just to kind of tie it back to the question about decentering Broadway. I think so much of it has to really starts with putting gender nonconforming and trans folks in positions of power and representation in these shows that we're creating, because the harsh acknowledgement this last year has been that there is maybe one or two roles that have been written in the commercial Broadway theater scene. And that's the thing, it's like, aren't we trying to decenter that anyway? So I think that kind of starts with pulling those folks into the conversation and seeing how we can maneuver and create something that represents all of us. So that's kind of what keeps me joyful, is seeing art that reflects us and being like, I want to see this on a much bigger scale, and I think it can happen.
Louis, do you want to? Louise, sorry, do you want to?
Yeah. The pictures that I shared on the chat are the thing that inspire me, right? When we enter a space and we have the children and we're able to share with them, or when we are with adult artists who are dreaming like we dream every day, or when I moved to New York, like yesterday, one of the pictures was me on the floor just with my mess, and now those wonderful humans who were helping me are right now moving into a new space, dreaming of accomplishing things in New York City. You know, that is the thing. That is the thing. It's a little bit of rejoicing on our struggle daily and learning from it, and being able to say, I have learned this. Does this serve you? Does this supports your path? And in exchange, there's something in you that will support where my path is going. So entering the space, building community, learning from each other are the things that monthly gives us again the energy to keep doing the work, because that's where it's worth it. So
yeah. Well, I will say it has been my joy and pleasure to be in conversation with you all for this hour and a half with my sister Chesray. And thank you all so much. This has been a fuel for me. Hopefully someone watching has also been changed in some way, but I just want to selfishly thank you all for the opportunity to riff and play some intellectual jazz. Chesray, anything you want to say to close us off?
I just want to say this space has brought so much ease into my day. I've met a lot of y'all today for the first time, but I feel like y'all in my community already, and that is just such a beautiful thing to see and be a part of. I really do think we should come together at least once a month to breathe together, to move our bodies together, to music that make us feel like we fly. And so just thank you for the space and bringing so much love and kindness to each other in the space. So yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for having us lead you all into this conversation.
Thank you all for watching.
All right, y'all. Does anybody want to add anything before we bounce?
Thank you so much for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.